Hi there fans, and hopefully you're in the mood to see something quite legendary, because in this part we're catching Cobalian. Now before, I don't really like to use a legendary Pokemon, I like to build my own team, but I do like the legendary Pokemon in this generation, and yeah, I do like catching them, so yeah, I'm still going to go for it. And now with Surf you can now get past this corner here. And that's another thing about Surf, is that if you go back to previous routes, you can usually pick up some items. And speaking of Surf, in this generation it seems to be faster than it was before, which I guess is something I do appreciate. Now Flash, if you remember, I got this in the big city, Castelia City of course, from some guy in an alley. So yeah, kids, talk to people in alleys. But yeah, again, Flash, it's not a HM, but yeah, it does make this little dungeon here a little easier. And here we have Strength. Now Strength, again, it seems to be streamlined from previous generations. You just push a rock into a hole and you can walk over it. I remember in the first gen we really have to like push boulders all around the floors. And even like push them down holes to previous floors. It was quite complex. Yeah, again, maybe it's just my imagination, but this generation has sort of the easiest of the dungeon puzzles, and that goes for gyms as well. Now, again, something I do like about the design of the dungeon in this game is the fact that, yeah, you can see here, by pushing this, I have a shortcut back to the beginning. So I don't have to go all the way around this floor again. Yeah, and in terms of design, this is actually quite a simple dungeon. It's just 3 floors. And I am using a guide to find all these hidden items. I'm not psychic. Now speaking of Darmanian, look, his ability, it used to be Hustle. Now Hustle raises your attack but lowers your accuracy, which is why I'm not too keen on it. But his ability now is Sheer Force. Now what Sheer Force does is raise the power of moves which have a secondary ability, but it takes away that ability. And what's a good example is Flare Blitz. Being a fire type move, it has the chance of burning your opponent. But with the ability Sheer Force, it won't burn your opponent, but the power of the attack is raised. Now I think that's a really good ability, especially for a Pokemon like Darmanian, which has high attack anyway. So yeah, Sheer Force is a really good way to go. And of course, Darmanian does have other abilities like Zen Mode, but yeah, I'd rather have Sheer Force. Of course, you have the move there, Rock Slide. You know, a decent rock type move, which I think I do end up using later on. Just because there is a powerful Pokemon which has a 4 times weakness to rock type moves. So yeah, that is a good reason to have a good rock type around. And here we have Golden's Chamber, the place where, you know, the legendary is hanging out. But before we do, this old man stops us and tells us a very long story. Back in my day, we had to. I don't know. Who are you? I tried to do an impression of an old man there. Let me see. Back in my day, back in 1962, and we had to say diggity because the Kaiser had stolen our word for 2. Back in 1962, sandwiches used to be called flap-breadies, and it used to cost 4 playing cards a bite. But anyway, I shouldn't really mock. He does tell us quite an interesting story here about how the heroes. And by the way, Pokemon Gen 4, look at this. You can have legendary Pokemon, right? And they can be important, and they can be significant, but they don't have to be the creators of the universe. Now look at these guys, they're just known for saving a city. But you know, I'll take these 3 legendaries over those Mew rip-offs from Gen 4 any day of the week, sunshine. Oh, and Arceus, you can, I'll tell you what you can do with Arceus. Your overpowered Mary Suva Pokemon. Ugh. But anyway, enough about my dislike for Gen 4 legendaries. And I guess they're not bad, I just dislike the fact that they have to be gods of the universe to be important. I wish they'd retcon that. I wish they would say that, okay, Dalgi and Palkia are not the creators of space and time, but they just represent space and time. I would prefer that. But yeah, anyway, these 3 legendaries, they're based off 3 heroes, or 4. And again, right, he's sort of hiding in the top corner here. That does sort of fill me with sort of chills. It takes me back to the first generation when you were walking around the caves, and you would see like the sprite of Articuno, and you'd be like, "Oh my god, that's a legendary!" But speaking of other Pokemon, he's Axum, and yeah, I just wanted to show him off. This is where you can catch Axum. He's a Dragon-type Pokemon. I want to say he's kind of like the Dratini of this generation, whereas he evolves into a powerful Dragon-type. But yeah, the Dragon-type he evolves into isn't as powerful as the other Dragon-types in other generations, which could be argued as a good thing. Yes, and you always need to save before you face one of these guys. And here we have Cobalian. Now he's a fighting steel type Pokemon, which isn't the first time we've seen that. Lucario was also a fighting steel type Pokemon. But yeah, something else I wanted to bring up is the fact that these guys are fighting type Pokemon, which seems a bit off for me, because I always thought fighting type Pokemon should be bipeds. But nevertheless, Cobalian, his name obviously taken from the word cobalt, which means metal. So, yeah, quite fitting he is a steel type. Now, something which I should talk about for these legendary Pokemon is the fact that they're apparently based off the 3 Musketeers. This one in particular based off Athos. Because like Athos, he's the oldest and the de facto leader of the group. I'm also reading a bit of trivia, and it says it bears close resemblance to a Makor, a type of goat, and a species of antelope such as the Great Kudu or Eland. I'm probably mispronouncing them, but again, that does bring up another point about these Pokemon, is I'm not sure exactly what they are. Are they antelopes? Are they deer? I guess it doesn't matter. Now, when Game Freak said they were introducing a new type of Pokemon, people wondered, will it be a light type? But then other people pointed out that fighting type is really the light type. And with these legendaries, you really get that idea. For a start, one of their signature moves is the Sword of Justice. Anyway, I think that's what it's called. No, my mistake, it's called Sacred Sword. And yeah, Sacred Sword does sound like a light type move. Now my tactic here is I'm first using a Brooker here, and I use Growl to lower his attack. And that's essentially so this battle isn't over too quickly. Now unfortunately, what will drag out this sort of capturing situation is the fact that I don't have any sleeping or paralysing moves. So at this point I have nothing left to do but spam fighting type moves. I mean spam Pokeballs. You know, I was just thinking this guy is meant to be like the leader of the 3 Musketeer Pokemon. Although what I find quite odd is that because he's a steel type, he's actually weak against fighting type moves. So in a sense the other fighting type Pokemon could beat him. But we'll see those guys later on. At this point I'm using Ultra Balls. I guess because he's also in a cave, you can also take advantage of Dusk Balls. And as the fight progresses, I guess you could also try some Timer Balls. Now, you can see here Mitchell knows the move Aqua Ring, and yeah, I think that's to sort of keep the battle going. And at this point I've got plenty of Pokeballs. His attacks do little damage because I've lowered his attack. So yeah, it just becomes a war of attrition now. Now the ability of these Pokemon is something called Justified, which means if they get hit by a dark type attack, their attack is then raised. Which again just fits into the idea that they're meant to be light types. Although honestly, it doesn't really seem like a good ability, because it relies on your opponent being a bit ignorant about the strengths and weaknesses of types. Now, what I find odd is that the next generation of Pokemon seems to be set in Paris, which is kind of odd because I think these Pokemon would have fitted in more there. And you see, I'm actually down to using Pokeballs now. Yeah, this guy is really holding out. But on the other hand, when it comes to catching Pokemon, I don't really have that much of a problem with it. And that could be because I only catch Pokemon I'm going to use. So it really doesn't happen that often. But yeah, this, what you're looking at now is, I guess, is meant to be the heart of Pokemon. Sort of catching them. At this point I'm thinking maybe I should have used Web, my Galvantia, because then I might have had a chance of at least paralysing this guy. But I guess at this point, yeah, it just becomes a case of throwing Pokeballs after Pokeball after Pokeball. Now, I think what I do in future legendary fights is to sort of turn off the battle animations, just so they go a bit quicker. It's a shame. It is a shame none of my Pokemon can send another Pokemon to sleep. But I guess it's better than the first generation, because from what I understand is that it was really unlikely to catch one of the legendary birds unless they had a status. In future generations they actually changed that, so you know that's something I do appreciate. So, yep, I'm catching a legendary. How are you? Now, I guess another legendary creature this could be based on is sort of the Chinese figure of a Quillen, which kind of looks like a deer with one antler. But yeah, there you go. But then again, I think when it comes to Pokemon, some of the legendaries are just based off. They're just different pieces of animals put together. Yeah, I'm just looking up the definition of what a Quillen is. Yeah, that's it. Or Chillin. I don't know how it's pronounced, but apparently, yeah, it's meant to be a good omen. Which I guess it does fit in with the idea of these legendaries being sort of good guys. Oh, you getting the Pokeball already? Maybe I should start a drinking game. Take a drink every time he breaks out of his Pokeball. And the thing is, when it comes to these legendary Pokemon, in theory, you could just throw one Pokeball at him straight away and capture the Pokemon. That is possible, but it is unlikely. And I actually remember doing a practice run of this just before I started recording, and would you believe I caught him like in a couple of moves. But now he's being stubborn. Anyway, I shouldn't complain. He's one of the Three Musketeers. He's a badass. Of course, he's gonna put up a fight. Is this the one? Oh, I hate that. I hate it when he teases you. Yeah, I've read some FAQs and some guides about catching a legendary Pokemon, and they do actually recommend you get like 50 Ultra Balls. Finally! Ooh, that was a long, hard struggle. Yeah, the Iron Will Pokemon, no kidding. Now, as for nicknames, I've decided to go for a different theme when it comes to these legendary Pokemon. I've decided to name them after a trio of comedians I like. And the first one will be named after someone called... I don't know who. Dennis, that's it. Just had to remind myself. This Pokemon is named after Hugh Dennis, a comedian on a TV show called Mock the Week. And yes, all the legendaries will be named after characters who have appeared on comedy panel shows. And I thought, you know, Cobalian, with his huge, grand stature. Yeah, the name Hugh Dennis does sort of compliment him. Yeah, anyway, thanks for the story, old man. Back in my day, you could go on a tram, have an apple pie for over a nickel.